Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're diving into a pretty big story that's shaking up Washington, D.C., and could have some serious implications for how power works in the nation's capital, and maybe even beyond. On August 11th, 2025, President Donald Trump announced something quite unexpected: a federal takeover of law enforcement in D.C. Yes, you heard that right. The federal government is stepping in to directly control the city's police department. This move, carried out under a rarely used law, the District of Columbia Home Rule Act, basically lets the president take over local policing in the capital for up to 30 days during what's called a public safety emergency. Along with this, 800 National Guard troops were deployed, and the DEA director, Terry Cole, was appointed as the interim police chief. Now, this isn't something you see every day. It's a significant shift in the usual way Washington is governed, and it's stirred up a lot of debate. So today, let's break down what this means, why it's happening now, and what the possible consequences are. First, let's talk about the legal foundation for this. Back in 1973, Congress passed the Home Rule Act to give D.C. residents some local control. After all, the city's people should have a say in how their community is run, right? The act created an elected mayor and city council, letting them handle most local issues without constant federal micromanagement. But Congress didn't give up all control. There are safeguards, like Section 740, that let the president step in if the city faces a serious emergency. What counts as an emergency? That's pretty broad. In past decades, this power was rarely used, mostly during extreme times like after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination in 1968 or following 9/11, when security concerns were sky high. So, the president's move is legal, but it's definitely unusual, and it raises important questions about how far federal power can go over the Capitol. Next, the White House says this takeover is necessary because crime in D.C. is out of control. But is that really the case? Crime in the Capitol is complicated. Overall, crime dropped after its pandemic spike. But violent crimes, especially homicides and gun violence, have stayed stubbornly high. In 2023, D.C. had one of its highest murder rates in decades. That's definitely alarming. Carjackings, assaults, especially some high-profile cases, have made people uneasy, and the media coverage and social media chatter have only amplified the feeling that the city is unsafe. Mayor Muriel Bowser and her team say they're making progress through targeted programs and partnerships. They think the federal intervention is unnecessary and disruptive, but the White House argues their efforts haven't been enough, and federal resources can get things under control faster. Here's where it gets tricky. This announcement comes just a few months before the presidential election, and Trump's campaign has been all about law and order, calling out D.C.'s mostly Democratic leadership as ineffective plays well with his base. The idea that the federal government should step in to clean up the Capitol also fits with a conservative stance against giving D.C. more autonomy or statehood. Democrats see this move as a political power play, undermining local democracy and fueling fears of federal overreach. And putting the DEA director in charge of the police? That's a bold step. It looks political, even if the White House insists it's about safety. Federal intervention in D.C. isn't totally new. In the past, especially during major crises like the 1968 riots or after 9/11, the feds have taken a bigger role in security. But those moments were tied to clear, immediate threats, mass unrest, terrorism, or disaster. What's different now is that this is about long-term crime trends, not one sudden event. That could change how often presidents feel justified stepping in. And that's a big deal for the city's future. People's reactions are mixed. Some residents hope more federal involvement means fewer shootings and safer streets. Others worry it'll mean tougher policing, less trust in law enforcement, and a loss of local control. Mayor Bowser slammed the decision as political theater that disrupts the city's efforts. The city council passed a resolution condemning the move, though it can't actually stop it. On the ground, police officers face uncertainty with new leadership and command, and civil rights groups warn that increased policing without community support might backfire. Will this federal takeover actually make DC safer? Maybe, but short-term law enforcement boosts often fade unless they're backed by long-term strategies, which can be tough in just 30 days. There's also the risk of setting a precedent. If public safety emergencies become a flexible tool for federal intervention, local autonomy could shrink, and future presidents might use this power more easily. Politically, it's a gamble. If crime drops, Trump can claim victory. If not, critics will say it was a misguided power grab. At its core, this situation highlights a fundamental tension in America: the balance between local control and federal authority. Most U.S. cities are run by local officials elected by residents. D.C., though, is different. It's the seat of the federal government, which means it's always been a mix of local governance and federal oversight. Supporters of D.C. statehood see this federal takeover as proof that residents need full representation and control. Opponents argue that the capital's unique role requires strong federal powers. Whatever happens in the coming weeks won't end that debate, but it adds a new chapter to the ongoing story about who really governs Washington, D.C. So, to wrap up, the federal takeover of D.C.'s police force is legal, but highly controversial. It's about real concerns over crime. But it's also a political move with big implications for democracy and local control. Whether this ends up being seen as a smart move to restore order or an overreach that undermines the city's autonomy depends on what happens next. As always, I'll be keeping an eye on how this story develops. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about the federal government stepping into DC's policing? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.